Hello everyone, back tuning into the 10th Winter 2016-2017 update. So we started the updates at the beginning of September, and it was the first Sunday in September, and we said at that point there were going to be 10 winter updates and 3 seasonal model roundups. So originally this was supposed to be the 10th and final Winter 16-17 update before the winter forecast was released at the end of the month. However, it's only the 19th of November, and over the past couple of weeks I've been thinking that it would be a bit too early, really, to end the winter updates today. So, in fact, what we're going to do is carry the winter updates on for one more week. So the 11th and final winter update, will be the final winter update, will be with you a week today, next Sunday. And that means that the seasonal model roundup, the third and final one of those, is for the first time ever going to be released on Saturday. So there'll be effectively, there'll be 2 really big updates for the winter of 2016-2017 next weekend. The seasonal models will be released on Saturday, and then the final winter update will be on Sunday. Before we get to all of that, we've got the 10th update to get through, and this is going to be a bit of an ocean special. So we're going to have a look at the current sea surface temperature anomalies in the Atlantic and the Pacific, and then we're going to have a look back at the archive from NOAA, and we're going to go right way back to the 1980s today to see whether we can find a year that is close to where we are right now in terms of the Atlantic and Pacific setup. After that, we'll have a look at solar activity, and we'll have a look at Siberian snow cover, all the things that we normally look at. So sit back and enjoy the ride for the 10th and penultimate winter update. Well, before I get on with that, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all the pages. If you have a browse visits and click through links, you'll be helping us to pay for our website. Thanks so much for doing that. There's also video ads to most pages, which own that content. When you watch them, they close back up again. It does help to pay for GazWeatherVids.com. The Christmas shop is open, so if you've got any Christmas shopping to do at Amazon between now and Christmas, do go to Christmas shop via the green button that says Christmas shop, and then from there, you click through the Amazon banners. That's the key to do. Click through the Amazon banners. Take you to Amazon where you do Christmas shopping as normal. Don't need to do anything else differently. Because you've gone from GazWeatherVids to Amazon, we get a revenue fee on all of the things that you are buying for Christmas. So a big thank you to everybody for doing that. As always, going to be quite a long video. I'm going to try and hopefully have it a bit shorter than some of the updates that we've been doing recently, but we'll see how we go with that. But it is going to be quite a long update, so if you can't watch it all in one go, don't worry, it'll be kept at website indefinitely. You're probably watching this on Sunday morning on the homepage. Later on today, it will be placed on the winter updates page with an extensive written report just discussing everything that we've talked about in the update. And what else I'm going to say? Also later on today, there'll be the 10th Christmas update. So it's all 10s today. 10th winter update, 10th Christmas update. That'll be with you around 7 o'clock tonight on the Christmas updates page. Well, I think that's it for all the announcements. Let's get on with the 10th Winter 16-17 update. And as I say, it's going to be a bit of an ocean special today. So we're going to start off with the sea surface temperature anomalies from NOAA for both the Pacific and the Atlantic. And this is from this time last week when we did the 9th update. So this is how things were looking. There's 3 areas that we are particularly interested in, of course, with this. So we've got the ENSO region, which is the area in the central part of the Pacific Ocean, going from Peru through to Indonesia. So it's this area just here, which is Peru, over to this area just here, which is Indonesia, of course. We've got a very weak signal for La Nina at the moment, a cold event, but it is a very, very weak cold event. We've been talking about this throughout the updates. We're sort of on a border between ENSO neutral to almost weak La Nina territory. Whether the La Nina was ever to be designated, we'll have to wait and see on that one. But that's where we are, sort of on a threshold between between La Nina, very weak La Nina, and ENSO neutral. Now, last week we also had quite a dramatic cooling of the northern Pacific Ocean. And that's quite surprising. It's been very warm up there over the past few years, but it does look as though it's rapidly starting to cool down now in the northern Pacific. And then over in the Atlantic, we've got a fairly warmish tropical Atlantic, but it is a bit cooler up in the north. Let's have a look at the very latest, Ben. So this is from the 17th of November. This is the latest from NOAA. And let's just go back to last week to compare that situation last week. This is the situation this week. I think we've seen a slight lessening of those cold sea surface temperature anomalies through the central part of the Equatorial Pacific. Still seen all four really weak La Nina condition, but maybe it's weakened ever so slightly over the past week. We're still on that borderline between ENSO neutral to weak La Nina. Now, this cold area up in the northern Pacific has, if anything, tended to strengthen a little bit, I think. So if we go back and have a quick look at last week again, that is situation last week. Go forwards. I think this has intensified a little bit, this cold anomaly just here. And then in the Atlantic, it remains very similar. Again, having a look at what happened last week to what's going on this week. No real change. One area of change is up here around the north, to the north and the northeast of Iceland. It's warmed up a little bit there. That's normally a fairly coolish place, but it's really warm right now. It's probably associated with all the northern blocking and the generally warm Arctic that we've had over the past few weeks. Again, if you come over here, you notice that to the north of Scandinavia and also to the north of Siberia, it's looking generally quite warm there. And I think that is associated very much with the warm conditions of the blocking that's been going on over the Arctic over the past few weeks. In terms of the Atlantic, though, no real change. This cold blob just here is there, but it's much less than we had at this point last year. I'll show you the charts for last year in a moment. Generally, the Atlantic is in a warmer phase compared to what it's been in, I think, for a couple of years now. So generally, the Atlantic is looking quite a bit warmer. And we said this when we did the NAO forecast, actually, right way back. The start of all of this was the NAO forecast back at the beginning of July. We said the Atlantic was likely to be in a warmer state, albeit not a tripole, but a warmer state this year compared to the past couple of years. I think that that's bearing out, and it probably does imply that the NAO should be in a weaker phase this year. It may not be set up all that well for a negative North Atlantic oscillation, but I think we are more towards a weaker North Atlantic oscillation, if you like. So we're not going to be as positive with the NAO signal this year. Right, let's go back and have a look at the archives from NOAA then. So you're going to see a lot of the charts at the moment. I'll try to whiz through them quite quickly. So this is how sea surface temperature anomalies were looking back on the 17th of November 1998. That's sort of the first detailed year that we have. Now, we've got to bear in mind with these charts as we go through them, we're starting off quite a long time away, and we are going to go back into 1980s as well, which is even further away. So the further away we go from where we are right now, the more basic the charts become. So the view will change. But essentially, this is the Atlantic just here, and then we've got the Pacific splitting two on this view. So the Eastern Pacific is just there, and the Western Pacific is over here. So that is how the oceans were looking at this point in 1998. Fairly warm Atlantic, got a strong La Nina though, and the other point is that the Northern Pacific was a lot colder than what we have right now. So I'm not sure there's really a match there between this year and 1998. 1999 is even colder with the Pacific Ocean, particularly very cold Northern Pacific Ocean, still quite a strong La Nina taking place in the equatorial Pacific. Over in the Atlantic, a little bit cooler than we are right now as well. So I don't think 1999 is particularly a match for this year in terms of those ocean temperatures. Neither is 2000. This is how things were looking on the 14th of November 2000. Exceptionally wet autumn. This one, it had a really unusual pattern, autumn of 2000, with a lot of cold sea surface temperatures around the UK, particularly, and going down into the tropical Atlantic, and then very warm to the north of that through the central North Atlantic and going up towards Newfoundland. So again, that is not really a match at all for what we've got this year. And in terms of the Pacific, Pacific, very cold still in the Northern Pacific, still the signal for La Nina, albeit weakening through the tropical Pacific, so no match there. 2001, a slightly different view, maybe slightly easier to see. So again, we see from the Atlantic, we'll deal with that first of all, and almost a tripole going on there in 2001. So you almost have it warm up here and then cool there and warm there. That's one of the first years that I produced a winter forecast, the winter 2001-2002, and I did forecast a colder than average winter. It was a complete disaster, and part of that was based on the tripole, actually. It is interesting to remember back to 2001 that the Atlantic, anyway, was fairly well set up for quite an interesting winter, but it very rapidly went down the tubes that year. In the Pacific, well, ENSO neutral, so that's perhaps closer to where we are right now in terms of the equatorial Pacific. Much colder, though, in the Northern Pacific. I don't think 2001 is really a match. 2002, no match there because we've actually got a weak El Nino event taking place through the winter of 2002-2003. I've got a bit of warmth up here in the northeastern corner of the Pacific Ocean, and then in terms of the Northern Pacific, it's a bit colder. So the Northern Pacific perhaps is quite close to where we are right now, but no match for the equatorial Pacific because it was El Nino winter. In terms of the Atlantic, fairly warmish Atlantic actually there. So again, that might be quite close to where we are now. 2002 is a little bit closer so far than any year we've seen right now, except for ENSO, and it's completely different. So again, no real match there with 2002. 2003 looking like this. Again, no real match. ENSO neutral to borderline El Nino in the equatorial Pacific. Fairly warm in the Northern Pacific Ocean, and in the Atlantic it does look quite warm there as well. Don't think 2003 is really a match, nor is 2004. The main thing we're looking for with this is the equatorial Pacific. So just here and just here, we're looking to try and get sort of La Nina, or at least weak La Nina, to borderline ENSO neutral. No real match there for 2004. So we go through to 2005. Now, this could be a little bit close. We have got a very weak borderline ENSO neutral to weak La Nina signal there. It's fairly coolish in the northeastern Pacific. I've got a tripole as well. This was one of the years where the UK Met Office forecast a cold winter for 05-06 because of the warm, cool, and then warm bands just here. Got a fairly weak tripod at this point, but it's strengthened through the winter. Could be a closer match, perhaps, to where we are right now in 2005. 2006, no real match, because that, again, is a weak La Nina taking place in November 2006. Atlantic looks rather different to where we are right now as well. 2007, no match at all, because this is a really strong La Nina type winter. 2007-2008 was moderate to strong, also much colder in the northeastern Pacific Ocean. In terms of the Atlantic, quite an interesting pattern there. It's very warm to the south of Greenland, and then underneath that it's cooler through the central and tropical Atlantic. Quite an unusual pattern there, probably left over from that very extremely wet summer that we had in 2007. Again, no real match. 2008, bordering on a tripole for 2008, so it's fairly warm just here, it's cooler just here, and then it's warmer down here again. That could have played a part in the cold winter of 08-09. In terms of the Pacific, a little bit closer through the equatorial Pacific to where we are now. It's basically a decaying La Nina. We had the very strong La Nina of 07-08, then 08-09 was sort of a decaying La Nina signal, and cold in the northeastern Pacific. So still no real match. I don't think we've had a match really to where we are right now so far. Let's carry on, have a look at 2009. Again, no match there because it's a strengthening El Nino. It's quite cold in the northeastern Pacific and the Atlantic. A little bit closer to where we are now. It's quite warm in the tropical Atlantic and then cooler up here, but it's fairly significantly different really in 2009 to what we've got going on at the moment. Again, no match 2010. This is a moderate to strong La Nina. Notice how rare it is to have a weak La Nina through these years. Either they tend to be moderate or strong La Ninas, or they're on the other side into El Nino territory. So a moderate strong La Nina on the 18th of November 2010. Cold in the northeastern Pacific. In the Atlantic, we have got a tripole signal, warm, cool, and warm. So that looks very conducive to a cold winter. Although the problem there is that's moderate to strong La Nina that goes against really a cold winter there. But I did predict that we'd have a cold start to winter and then probably go milder. No match for 2011 either. We've still got the ongoing La Nina event then, quite a strong one. Still cold in the northeastern Pacific. In terms of the Atlantic, significantly different really to where we are at the moment. 2012, that one is showing a tripole, so it's warm there, cool there, and warm underneath. So that tells us we're probably setting up a pattern that's conducive to a colder winter. More or less ENSO neutral through the Atlantic. So that is a little bit more interesting, closer to where we are right now. Not as warm, not as cold, I should say, in the northeastern Pacific as well. So the Pacific may be a little bit closer to where we are now. The Atlantic, not so much. 2013, looking like this. So that one generally looks about average really with the sea surface temperature in the Atlantic, and not much of a signal in the Pacific either. It's fairly warm up here in the northeast Pacific. This is the start of the warm years for the northeastern Pacific, so fairly warm up there. And then in the tropical Pacific, it looks about ENSO neutral, to be honest. Don't think that's a match to where we are right now. 2014, we've got a weak El Nino signal then, and also quite warm in the northeastern Pacific. Over here, there's the cold blob getting going. Again, I don't think that's really a match for where we are now, so in terms of ENSO. And then that brings us up to 2015. So we've got the really strong El Nino, Super Nino taking place there. Obviously, that means that it doesn't match up with this year at all. Also warm in the northeastern Pacific, and there's the cold blob. So what happened last year, or a lot of what happened last year, was down to the warm El Nino and the cold blob in the Atlantic combining to produce a very extreme westerly pattern. Again, no match to where we are right now. Now we can go further back than that into the 1980s. We haven't had a match yet for those years, so let's go further back to the 1980s. We can go back to 1984. And remember, these are a very long time ago, so the charts are very basic, but you can see 1984 is not a match for us right now. It's very cold through the Atlantic, most of the Pacific looking cold as well, so no match there. We move through to 1985. That's closer in terms of ENSO because it's a November 1985 has a weak La Nina signal, borderline neutral to weak La Nina. It's colder in the northeastern Pacific though, and the Atlantic still significantly colder than what we've got going on for this year. 1986, I should say, next. That one has a weak El Nino signal there, winter of 86, 87. It's quite warm in the northeastern Pacific. The Pacific looks fairly well set up for a mild winter, interestingly. It was cold, very cold January, of course, in 1987. Over in the Atlantic, it's colder in the north and warmer to the south. Again, no match at all, really, for this year. 1987, so that one looks fairly warm in the Atlantic. A little bit of a tripole there, a bit warmer there, cooler there, and then near normal just there to warm. Then we've got a weak El Nino signal in the Pacific, and the northeastern Pacific looks a little bit colder also. 1988 is our next one, November 1988. This is a sequence of very mild winters, by the way, so we've got a really strong La Nina, that means that it's very likely to be a mild winter, of course, when La Nina gets that intense. So we've got an intense La Nina, cold in the northeastern Pacific, the Atlantic looking fairly cool as well. So once more, no match for this year. Now, 1989 is possibly the closest I've found for where we are this year. We've got a decaying and weak, borderline neutral, or neutral to borderline weak La Nina seen on. It's warmish in the northeastern Pacific, and in the Atlantic, it's fairly cool up there. It's warmer around Newfoundland, and then the tropics look fairly warm as well. What do you think? Let's have a look at this year again. So let's right now, 2016. This is 1989. That might be the closest I've got. It's not ideal. It's not perfect, but November 1989 might be the closest that we have. Go through to 1990, and again significantly different both in terms of the Pacific and the Atlantic. 1991 much colder, as is 1992 and 1993. Those years are during or after the Pinatubo eruption in 1991. So the sea surface temperature anomalies, the ocean temperature anomalies are very much affected by a cooling that took place from 1991 to around 1993, meaning significantly colder Pacific and Atlantic sea surface temperature anomalies there. 1994, that looks significantly different to right now. It's cold in the northeastern Pacific. We've got a weak El Nino, and the Atlantic looking fairly coolish. 1995, just preceding the cold winter of 95-96. Now, that has a weak La Nina going on, but it's stronger than the one we have right now. Fairly cool in the northeastern Pacific, and then a tripole in the Atlantic. So that does look quite well set up for a cold winter, and indeed, we did have a cold winter in 95-96. November 1996 looking like this. That has a weak La Nina, neutral to borderline La Nina. It's cold in the northeastern Pacific. The Atlantic looking fairly warm in the north, colder towards America. And then finally we come to 1997, and we have the Super Nino, of course, taking place there, quite cold in the northeast Pacific, and then a tripole in the Atlantic. That would have been a cold winter, I think, had it not been for this El Nino. So going back, out of all of these years, and most of them do not match up, nearly all of them don't match up to where we are right now. The closest I can find is 1989. It's not an ideal match, but I think in terms of the Atlantic and Pacific setup, that possibly is the closest to what we have for this year, albeit it isn't ideal. So we can see that it is a very unique year for 2016 in terms of what the oceans are doing. Again, we had this last year. There's no year but matched up last year to where we was at this point in the year in 2015. Another very unique year for 2016. Now let's have a look at what ENSO has been doing. So this is the SOI, this is the Southern Oscillation Index, and this is an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the Southern Ocean between Darwin and Tahiti. When you have negative numbers, it tells you that the atmosphere is in an El Nino reflective state. When you have positive numbers, it tells you that the atmosphere is in La Nina positive, is in La Nina state. So essentially what's been going on over the past few weeks and months is that been trading numbers. At times with this, we've been very positive, indicating the atmosphere is reflective of La Nina, but also at times we've been getting very negative numbers telling us that the atmosphere is reflective of El Nino. And when we're trading numbers like that, it means that the ocean cannot develop the signal that it wants. In this case, it wants to develop a La Nina, but the atmosphere has been fighting against it. So we see on the 2nd of November, for example, we was very positive with the SOI then, at plus 18, and on the 3rd as well at plus 13, very reflective on those days of La Nina. But as we scroll down, the latest over the past week has gone very negative with these numbers again. So on the 13th, we're at plus 5, a little bit reflective of La Nina, but on the 14th, we go down to minus 2. Then on the 15th, we get a crash and go down to minus 18, really reflective of El Nino now. 16th, we're at minus 27, 17th, we're at minus 24, 18th, we're at minus 12. So several days there of very negative numbers within the SOI, and that tells us that for those days, the atmosphere was in an El Nino type state. And that is stopping the ocean from producing La Nina. So when we said just here that over the past week we may have seen a slight weakening of the La Nina scene, of those colder than average anomalies through the equatorial Pacific, it's possibly because the SOI and the atmosphere, we tell that via the SOI, has been in an El Nino setup that fights and stops the La Nina from being produced. So there's no sign that we're going into a La Nina for this winter. I think we're going to stick around where we are now to the end of the year, which is borderline La Nina to ENSO neutral, and then I think we're going to lift up towards just proper ENSO neutral conditions. So we'll see those already very weak and slight colder than average sea surface temperature anomalies just fading away in the second half of winter. That's what CFS-V2 is showing. This is its latest forecast for the equatorial Pacific Ocean. This is where we are right now, of course. So again, borderline ENSO neutral to weak La Nina. That's where we stay to the end of the year. This is January just here. But after that, we start to pick back up. And by February, March, we're going up towards, back firmly towards ENSO neutral condition. The ECMWF is very similar as well. No deviation from where we are right now, which of course is just here. Get through towards January, which is there. We're beginning to lift up a little bit back towards proper ENSO neutral, leaving those really weak La Nina conditions behind. JAMSTEC is very similar as well, just on the threshold of a La Nina event, so somewhere between ENSO neutral to La Nina through there. And then early next year, the trend is begin to lift things back up. Where we go beyond that, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, we might go into another El Nino event next summer, but that's very speculative. So in terms of what the oceans are doing, it looks like we've got a really unique year again this year. The closest match is possibly November 1989 to where we are right now. That was a mild winter, 89-90, but I'm not all that pleased really with that match. There are several really significant differences. It was coming out of a strong La Nina, which of course we haven't had this time. So the reason it was sort of a borderline La Nina event is just that La Nina was unraveling from a very strong event of 88-89. So that doesn't really match up to where we are now. It's also going up towards solar maximum in 1989. So again, that doesn't really match up to where we are now because we're going down to solar minimum. I'm talking about solar activity in a moment. So not all that pleased, but 1989 possibly the closest. But maybe what we should take from this is that once again, the oceans are in a very unique and different state this year compared to anything that we've seen, certainly back to 1984. Right, let's have a look at what's going on in the tropics. So no change this. I'll just whiz through this very, very quickly. The numbers are still the same as they have been for the past few weeks. 15 depressions, 14 storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 major Category 3 or above hurricanes. Again, no change on what we've seen over the past few weeks. It looks like the hurricane season is pretty much over. Never say never till you get towards the start of December, but it looks like the hurricane season is over. Been the strongest hurricane season since 2012. That may play in to an increased risk of blocking. QBO, quasi-Brownian oscillation, we know what's going on there. It's in a very unique state. So we're in the westerly QBO. We should be easterly. That's all I'm going to say on that, because we're going to look at a chart next week for the final update update, we're going to look at a chart that's come from our good friend Stuart Markham at chorleyweather.com that reanalyzes the QBO right way back to the start of the 20th century, and we'll see whether this, we know this is unique back to 1950s, we'll see whether the situation with the QBO now is unique right the way back to the start of the 20th century. That's going to be really interesting to see for next week's final update. It'll take us back really to where we started with these winter updates, which is discussing the QBO. That was the big talking point at the beginning. It's going to be the big talking point at the end. There is a plan that goes into these updates, you know. Having a look at the solar activity next. So this is the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net. Hardly anything to be seen, really. There's a few very minor sunspots there, but solar activity is designated officially as being at very low levels once again. We are moving into solar minimum. We know we're doing that. This is the Gavs Weather Vids Winter Update Daily Solar Tracker from our good friend James Ackroyd, who's been keeping an eye on this right way through winter updates that started at the beginning of September. This is where we was when we began the updates just here. So we was fairly high with the activity, albeit declining. Had quite a bit of sunspot activity. The orange spots there and the orange lines indicate each day's individual sunspot numbers. So you see, I was having a fair number of fairly high sunspots back then. Bit of a change took place from October just here when all of the numbers, or I should say all of the sunspot numbers and the trend lines began moving downwards, and that's just continuing right now. So coming over to this side of the chart, we've nearly filled in the tracker now. This takes us to the very end, to next week's update. So we've nearly filled in the solar tracker, and we see that we are still very much trending down. The orange line, which again is indicating daily sunspot numbers, that's trending down. The green line is trending down. This line up here, which is solar flux, that's sort of the noise that's coming off the sun, that's trending down as well. So everything looks like it's moving downwards from where we was when we started off. There's definitely been a downwards movement in solar activity over the past few months since we started the winter updates, which you would expect because we are moving incrementally closer to solar minimum, but it doesn't rule out the chance that we might get a ramp up in activity at any point. Remember, the idea behind this is that when you've got weak sunspot numbers, when you've got low solar activity, it's kind of increasing the chance, loading the dice, if you like, towards the northern blocking, particularly on the European side of the Arctic. A lot of cold winters tend to be associated somewhere around and often just after solar minimum. And then we come up to Siberian snow cover. So this was a situation this time last week when we did the night update. We know that we rapidly had snow cover advancing across Russia and Siberia at the end of October. By this time last week, that snow had pushed into Europe. It also pushed into Scandinavia. Let's have a look at the very latest, and this is it. So again, all of Russia is covered. The snow is also there across eastern parts of Europe, albeit it's starting to recede back just a little bit compared to what we had last week, especially in the northeastern portions of Europe. In Scandinavia, it's also thawed a little bit to the south, particularly across southern parts of Sweden, although many northern parts of Sweden and also Norway covered with snow, and that extends back into Finland as well. Generally, there has been a little bit of a reduction in snow cover over the past week compared to what we had when we did the 9th update. It's not particularly important now. The important period is through October, and particularly late October into start of November. That's when you want to see a rapid advance of snow cover. We had that. So if you like, the damage has been done, and we've just got to wait and see how that feeds back in terms of a strengthening of the Siberian high. What's going on now is that milder air has been pushing up from southern Europe, just thawing things out a little bit. But the feedbacks from what happened in October to the very start of November, they are yet to be seen And we'll discuss that more when we do the winter forecast on the 1st of December. Finally, I want to leave you with this chart. This is from our good friend James Ackrill. This is how the 500 millibar height anomalies have developed through November so far. So this takes us up to November, to the 17th of November. And you see, it's been quite an unusual pattern so far. We've had a lot of blocking up to the north, particularly around Svalbard and going into the Arctic, also extending down into a ridge in the Atlantic, and then we've also had quite a deep trough through Central Europe. So that's the reason it's such a cold first half to November, because the flow has been doing something like that, bringing cold air via that blocking down into particularly central, eastern and northeastern parts of Europe. Also, this trough just here explains why we had such snow cover, extensive snow cover across many parts of Russia late October and into the start of November. Because of this blocking up here, it's been very warm across the Arctic, and the polar vortex has been in a massively weakened state compared to many recent years. And that blocking has pushed the cold air down into the mid-latitudes, although not so for America. For America and Canada, you've been stuck under a ridge. I know we do have people watching from America. You've been stuck under a ridge. It's been generally quite warm there. All of the cold has tended to be on the Eurasian side of the blocking through November so far. Now, I'm talking about that because next week, for the final update, we're going to have a look at some November analogues to see whether we can match up November 2016's weather pattern to past years. So, as well as looking in depth at the QBO, we will also look at some very interesting analogues for November. James is beavering away on those as we speak, and they'll be with you for that 11th and final update that we're going to release next week. There could be some very, very interesting years in those analogues, and I'll say no more than that. Come back next week for the 11th update. Right, so a little bit shorter than we've managed over the past few weeks. We're under 40 minutes, so a little bit better with that. That completes the 10th update. As I say, at one point this was supposed to be the final update, but I thought we'd squeeze another one in, and your final winter update will be a week today, the 11th and final winter 2016-2017 update, which means that the day before that, something completely new will happen, because on Saturday next week we will issue the we'll release the final seasonal model roundup, where we get something like 13 long-range models together and see what they're all showing for the third and final time for the winter. And then the day after that, it'll be the final winter update, and it's all building to that final and official GarethWeathers.com winter 2016-2017 forecast that's going to be released on the 1st of December. So we're almost there now. We're almost at the end of the journey, and what a journey it's been. But still a couple more updates to do next weekend before we get to winter forecast. Right, come back later on today for the 10th, all 10s at Gareth Weathers today, but 10th Christmas update. That'll be around 7 o'clock tonight. And before that, this will be placed sometime this afternoon on the winter updates page with an extensive written report just explaining everything that we've discussed in the video. But at 38 minutes, that's all for now. And thanks for watching. Come back for those final updates next weekend.